have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. The latest attack talking point being marshaled for the Harris-Walz campaign by the Obama 2.0 team and their sycophantic mainstream media mouthpieces is that Donald Trump is calling half of the American electorate enemies from within, and that he's prepared to unleash the U.S. military onto his foes. Of course, this is unmitigated bullshit of the highest order. A more perfect example of unsubstantiated fear porn has seldom been seen or heard. The Harris-Walz-Obama 2.0 team had to contort and edit cherry-picked soundbites into shapes that origami experts would envy to arrive at the current disingenuous narrative. Both Harris and Walz, along with the usual suspects on cable news, are floating this absurd idea.
You heard his words coming from him. He's talking about the enemy within Pennsylvania. He's talking about the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country. It's a serious issue. He is saying that he would use the military to go after them. Think about this. And we know who he would target. And we know who he would target because he has attacked them before. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. Election officials who refuse to cheat by filling extra votes and finding extra votes for him. Judges who insist on following the law instead of bending to his will. This is among the reasons I believe so strongly that a second Trump term would be a huge risk for America and dangerous. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged.
Of course, just like everything that oozes out of Harris's reptilian mouth, there isn't a shred of evidence to it. As Megyn Kelly pointed out on her podcast on Wednesday.
But this new-ish line of attack is that Trump sees anyone who does not support him, as a, quote, an enemy from within, against whom he might unleash the U.S. military. All right. That's where they've gone with some comments Trump has made on the campaign trail lately that do not say that. It began yesterday with a new ad released by the Harris campaign. Watch.
Donald Trump, more dangerous, more erratic than ever before.
Echoing fascists.
The worst people are the enemies from within.
The enemy from within are more dangerous than Russia.
We have some very bad people. It should be very easily handled by the military.
Trump's basically going to have the army show up at your front door if you don't vote for him. Sounds ominous. But we just decided to take a little fact check of the examples in that ad. In the first clip, you heard Mr. Trump say, the worst people are the enemies from within. The clip was taken from a rally he held in Coachella, California this past weekend. In the full clip, Mr. Trump was talking about Congressman Adam Schiff.
The worst people are the enemies from within. The sleazebags, like a guy that you're going to elect to the Senate, Shifty Adam Schiff. He's a sleazebag.
That's it. He doesn't like Adam Schiff. Who cares? Next up in the ad, you hear Trump say, the enemy from within are more dangerous than Russia. This was taken from a rally in Wisconsin on October 6th. He was actually talking about fascists, Marxists, and communists that he believes are pulling the strings in Washington.
The enemy from within, the crazy lunatics that we have, the fascists, the Marxists, the communists, the people that we have that are actually running the country, not her. She's not running it, and Biden's not running it either, and you all know that. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China.
This is a political argument. This is generic political argument. These people are our enemies. Same as he says, the press is the enemy of the people. They're working against the will of the people to undermine democracy. I mean, this is like the Democrats say this stuff all the time. This is not about arresting private citizens in their home or unleashing the Navy SEALs as you go for a swim in the Atlantic. The last example in her ad is one the campaign, Harris campaign and corporate media are really seizing on. In the ad, Trump says we have some very bad people, should be very easily handled by the military. Going to have paratroopers landing in your backyard, wanting to see how you voted. It was taken from an interview he just did with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business this past Sunday. But the question Trump was asked was whether he was expecting any chaos on Election Day. And the reason she asked him that is that President Biden recently said he's concerned Election Day will not be peaceful. And he's clearly suggesting Trump supporters will be responsible for that. And Ms. Bartiromo in the question poses to Trump, what do you think is going to happen? And in setting it up, she reminds him that since he's left office, many foreign nationals have illegally come over the border. So she kind of raises two issues in one, saying we've got illegals here who are murderers. You'll hear it. And also Joe Biden says we're going to have chaos on Election Day. So what do you think? And you will hear in Mr. Trump's answer, he is talking about possible Election Day chaos, which she raised and Biden raised, in reference to leftist radicals and the potential use of the National Guard and military if things spin out of control. Listen.
What about that, though? Are you expecting chaos on Election Day?
No, I don't think so. Not from the side that votes for Trump.
But I'm just wondering if these outside agitators will start up on Election Day. Let's say you win. I mean, let's remember, you've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
You have people on the terrorist watch list, 350 in the last couple of years. You got, like you said, 13,000 murderers and 15,000 rapists.
Right.
What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful Election Day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of Election Day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
It makes perfect sense what he is saying.
The Harris-Walz-Obama 2.0 crew is so infuriatingly disingenuous, and arrogantly so, that this election needs to be a landslide message against the far left that the American people are simply done with their now obvious soft Marxist revolution. In fact, when you examine what Trump said, as exposed by Kelly, he was alluding to the radical, unimpeded violence perpetrated by the radical left that plagued his first administration. Violence that was promoted and facilitated by the far left elected and activist classes through their Black Lives Matter and Antifa proxy protest groups. From 2016 onward, the United States experienced a series of ongoing protests that almost always escalated into violence. The BLM movement began in 2013 but gained significant momentum after the death of George Floyd in May of 2020, 6 months before the 2020 general elections. These protests spread nationwide, with Minneapolis becoming an epicenter of unrest. Violence erupted in just about every major U.S. city, with incidents of arson, vandalism, and confrontations with law enforcement. The scale of destruction was significant in some areas, leading to billions of dollars in property damage across the United States. Antifa activists were almost always present at BLM protests, especially in cities like Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City. Their involvement was always marked by direct confrontations with police and counter-protesters, property damage, and attempts at true constitutional insurrection to create autonomous zones like the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle.
The situation here in Santa Monica, California is very fluid. You can see police here now firing tear gas into the crowd. They are trying to push these folks back. Earlier today, just a few blocks away, there was looting underway nearby. Police seem to have had enough.
The nation erupted into scenes of chaos, violence, and widespread destruction into the early morning hours. Dozens of American cities up in flames after some protests turned into riots, often followed by looting as a nation simmering with unrest unraveled. In Los Angeles, hours before a curfew was ordered, the city became a war zone. After attempting to breach television studios, large groups torched police cruisers as officers fired back with rubber bullets. Before nightfall, the looting began. Department stores, jewelers, and high-end apparel shops trashed by unruly mobs. The mayor calling on the governor to dispatch the National Guard for the first time since the Rodney King riots in 1992.
We've seen this before in Los Angeles. When the violence escalates, no one wins.
After 3 nights of protest and violence, the state of emergency in Los Angeles mirrored by pockets of anarchy nationwide. Described as all hell breaking loose in Seattle, when police lost control of downtown, crowds destroyed, then took over their vehicles. With demonstrators out in force again today, a violent takedown in Philadelphia, where a Foot Locker was looted after more than a dozen officers were injured there last night. With tear gas choking the streets of Miami, police battled protesters to keep control of their headquarters. With banks burned, highways shut down, and City Hall on fire in Nashville, there was more than 1,000 arrests. The National Guard is moving into Chicago after clashes between protesters and police.
The cat and mouse game here in Santa Monica continues. You can see police are ready to move in on all these protesters again. The curfew starts in less than 30 minutes. Scenes like this are playing out all across the nation as the National Guard moves in.
In each outbreak of violence across the nation, one thing presented as a common denominator. The urban areas plagued by the continuing violence had Democrat-led governments that refused to serve the general public in keeping the peace, in maintaining law and order. And anyone with half a brain understood it was all for political gain looking to the election. A manufactured, condoned, and facilitated chaos meant to sway an election in favor of Biden, Harris, Obama 2.0. These are the enemies within that Donald Trump is talking about. The anarchists, the far-left progressive activists, the Marxists, the neo-Bolsheviks, those who make up Obama 2.0, just as they made up Obama 1.0. The people puppeteering the Harris-Walz ticket as we speak. The American Fifth Column. Now that we've defined who Trump was referring to, his declaration makes sense, doesn't it? Setting entire cities on fire and executing violence in the streets, destroying people's livelihoods and life's works isn't about redressing government. It's a criminal act of unlawful violence. Looting isn't a political statement. It's opportunistic theft. And those who condone and facilitate these unlawful acts are just as guilty of these crimes as those who are executing the criminal acts themselves. The primary purpose of government, and in fact the only legitimate purpose of government, is to keep the citizenry safe under the rule of law. There are no exceptions to that responsibility, and it applies to all citizens, not just the preferred classes as defined by the Machiavellian activist class that is trying to balkanize the American people for their electoral benefit. Yes, Virginia, there is an enemy within. They are the American fifth column, who seek the fundamental transformation of the United States of America from a constitutional republic to a socialist democracy. This is the Harris-Walz ticket, as was the Biden-Harris ticket before them and the Obama-Biden ticket before them. This is the entirety of the Obama and progressive movements, and you damn well better start realizing that this choice, the choice on which direction our country is going to travel, is indeed on the ballot this November 5th.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our First Amendment right to free speech is under attack by woke activists and politicians. Wokeism seeks to suppress opinions and ideas that are deemed offensive, insensitive, or problematic, thereby stifling the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. It emphasizes social justice, identity politics, political correctness, and the regulation of language, and relies on euphemisms and ambiguous language to create the illusion of consensus, thus avoiding confrontation with opposing viewpoints. Wokeism is antithetical to free speech because it stifles the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. This is in direct opposition to the principles of free speech. Wokeism is an ideological cancer shopped by those who want to control you. This November, we have an opportunity to render wokeness to the ash heap of history. Vote smart. Vote against wokeness and those who would use it to control you.
And, you know, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, you know, we've got all kinds of different places to start, Frank. We've got the the mastermind behind October 7th being taken out by Israel. That's a big deal, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It should be a turning point. But when you're talking about Islamo-fascist groups like Hamas or like Hezbollah or Al Qaeda, and the litany of them, cutting off the head usually creates 7 more that want to take its place. And we've talked about this before. It's because that mentality believes that martyrdom brings them closer to God. They love death more than we love life. Osama bin Laden said it several times in the fatwas that he issued before 9/11 when he was warning the United States that something bad was coming and we didn't listen. So yes, he's gone. It's a great thing. You know, Comeuppance has met with him and decided to take him. But it's not going to be the end of Hamas.
No, I agree. There's still got a ways to go, but it certainly, Kamala Harris tried to take as much as she could from this story today, and that is by going out there and saying, well, now the war can kind of come to an end. We'll get the hostages back. Israel can be secure, and this kind of thing. And Israel's far from secure, Frank. This is not something that she can just, or anybody for that matter, can say, all right, well, it show's over, because they're still coming at Israel, including Iran.
Well, it's typical of her arrogance that we in the West can decide when Israel's war is going to be over. I mean, that's just an exercise in arrogance that's that's beyond textbook. But it also demonstrates her complete lack of understanding of foreign policy and what's happening in the world. She really is completely devoid of any knowledge about the world stage and especially about conflicts like this. If she understood it, then she would know that Hamas, even if Israel wins this by quote unquote eliminating Hamas, it's never going to go away. It's just going to be a less potent threat because the ideology that creates it isn't going to go away. Until there's a reformation inside the Islamic faith, that's never going to happen. And because the Quran is considered the literal word of Allah, there's no interpretation, wiggle room, or flexibility to be able to have that reformation. So it's not going anywhere. So her idea that it's the sun will come out tomorrow, Annie, that doesn't work in this instance. But it really does demonstrate her complete lack of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, she has to virtue signal to those in places like Michigan and different enclaves where you've got the Muslim support, basically, that somehow that she's more on the side of we've got to get Israel to stop all this and try to virtue signal in that way.
For all of the pandering that she's done to the Muslim community in Michigan and Pennsylvania and some portions of Virginia, she's fallen flat on her face with that, because when you look at, and again, I don't put a whole lot of faith in polls, but when something comes up that flags a percentage that looks odd, you have to mention it. She's not doing that well with Muslim voters. She should be dominating. She should be dominating in those areas, in those states, and she's not. So her pandering and the left's pandering to all of these people who took to the campuses, that did more damage than what they're saying when they address the Muslim communities in these states.
No, I completely agree. And something else too, Frank, that I want to talk with you about this morning is, and we'll continue, of course, and as we come up on the break here in just a little bit, is that, of course, the interview, the big interview. Talk about doing more damage than good. What was that? What happened with that?
It was an exercise in being tone deaf to the audience she was talking to, and again, an example of her extreme arrogance that she was going to go on somebody else's home turf and start lecturing them about what they should think and how they don't know anything. She blew a great chance there, and she demonstrated that she has contempt for not only Donald Trump, but the people who support him. I mean, she hates him, and you could see it oozing out of her reptilian mouth the entire time she was sitting before Bret Baier.
Yeah, I think you're right. The word contempt is the right word, and that's how she, just framed the whole thing. And you're right. It's as if she was there to lecture and to just kind of go for the jugular. It seems like it was really over the top. Again, the interview, it's in and of itself I think it was a disaster. I can't imagine anybody. Here's the thing, Frank. There was no joy in that interview from Kamala Harris. There was no vision for America. There was nothing like that. It's like they took Joy and they put Joy on a bus and gave Joy $40 cash and said, "You're out of here. We don't want you around anymore. We're just going with anger now."
No, and it was palpable. There were certain portions of that interview where I thought she was going to leap out at Bret Baier. She was so angry. And a lot of times whenever she talked about Donald Trump, you could literally see the hate in her eyes. She hates that. That's the only thing that was conveyed in this interview was her hatred for Donald Trump and her absolute contempt for Trump's followers. She hates them. She hates Donald Trump. She is so riddled with Trump derangement syndrome that she can't think of anything else. And that's why he was incorporated in every single non-answer that she gave.
Yeah.
Because she didn't answer any questions. All she could tell you is how bad Trump is. Now, if you're going into an interview where I would say at least 95% of the people, you know for a fact, are supporting or have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump, that's not the way to convince any of them to consider your candidacy. So it was almost as if she was annoyed at having to give a what they're going to call an interview, what everybody else is calling a talk where she answered nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the polls, she got no bump, but she dropped. And the only polls that really matter that I look at right now are the betting pools. Polymarket is one of them, and she has dropped to below 40%.
Yes, that's significant. Well, something I was thinking about too, Frank, and this is just kind of out of left field, and that is, they have their own internal polling, which is a lot different, from what we see in the national polls with the mainstream media polls, and I think that dictates what they do, their behavior. And again, this is just out of left field, but could she have just gone into this Fox News thing kind of knowing that her time is kind of come and gone? She's probably not going to win. And maybe she just wanted to burn the house down, with that hatred like you're talking about. Because who in their right mind would do that? You don't want to come off as measured, thoughtful, presidential even.
I'm going to take a different track on that. I think that her team, which is Obama 2.0, it just is. Take a look at everybody around her. You have to be blind as a bat not to understand that Obama's been pulling these strings the entire time. Everybody in the administration is a holdover from when Obama was in office. The same pool of people. That's why nothing has changed and it's only gotten worse. I think that these people are so arrogant in their fake moral superiority over everybody else, especially people who support Donald Trump or who call themselves conservatives or constitutionalists, that they think that they're going to win out in the end. And that's why the question about, right now the big false narrative being shopped by the Harris-Walz-Obama 2.0 campaign is the enemy from within canard that's been cobbled together from several speeches that Donald Trump made to make it sound like he's going to unleash the military on the American people should he win, which doesn't make any sense, but that's what they're going with. He was asked what happens if there's chaos after the election. It's a legitimate question. Because if you think that the radical, arrogant, self-righteous, non-thinking it through left is going to go quietly into the night because the election has been certified, you're smoking crack.
Yeah. You're right.
Trump wins, and by all indications, he's got a very good chance of winning. The major cities are going to burn. So what he addressed with that, and that's something Joe Biden brought up, not Donald Trump, Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's answer was, ain't going to come from my people. Ain't going to come from the people who vote for me. It doesn't make sense. The idea that this time governors are going to have to deploy the National Guard so that billions of dollars of damage don't happen to our major cities, it needs to be a reality. We're going to destroy things because we didn't get our way 3-year-old mentality, temper tantrum mentality. We've got to move past that as a culture.
Oh, I agree. But they still have this animosity towards America. And, by having the cities burned, by doing these kinds of things, that just is all part of their, that's going to put a smile on their face. They think, oh, good, we're making the progress we want to make in terms of completely destabilizing America.
Only the critically daft can find progress in destruction. I know they want to foment transformative change through the use of chaos, which is very It's very Marxist. It's very communist revolution. If you even remotely understand history, you see this as very blatant. But nothing progresses through destruction. It just doesn't. Not societally anyway. This division between the people, it destroys. There's no unity there. It doesn't help to move anybody forward. It creates animosity. And that's what they've been doing. They didn't think it through. If you divide the country up into every demographic you can slice and dice it into and pit them all against one another, they're going to pick who they want to run them, not you. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to be the first one that they slice and dice up because you were part of the people that created the problem. And that's what's happening to the Harris campaign. These people created the problem that we exist in today. Everybody knows it because they've seen it happen. And now they're saying, hey, man, I've decided I want to be a change agent, so you have to look at me like that. I'm identifying as a change agent.
That's right.
Well, I guess that identity thing, just because you declare it, doesn't make it so, now does it?
No, it doesn't. And Trump is actually the one who's actually building coalitions because people from all different groups, like you're talking about, that have been carved up, by the far left and the Democrat Party elite, people are just figuring out that they share a lot of commonality, that they share a lot of values, that they want to have a good economy. They don't want an opportunity economy. They want an economy that has opportunity in it, in and of itself. And the government, and this is what I really kind of laugh at, Frank, the government doesn't bestow upon you opportunities in the economy. The economy is there, but you're supposed to make your own opportunities. Government needs to get out of the way.
Well, and this is point and parcel of the problem here. They believe the government can. They believe the government is the bestower of rights, is the bestower of that opportunity, when in fact our country was founded on, if you keep the government out of the way, then everybody's got equal opportunity. The only thing the government's supposed to do is protect the citizenry and make sure there's a level playing field. And that means getting out of the way, not coming in and picking winners or losers. And that's what the progressives have been doing since the days of Woodrow Wilson, picking winners and losers and keeping their thumb on the societal scale.
Now it's like the memo has gone out, paint the worst possible scenario and just make it up. Just make it up out of whole cloth. No holds barred. Say whatever you want about Trump. He may even also single-handedly lead the space alien invasion that will take over the earth and we all become food. I wouldn't be surprised if they would say something like that.
Yeah, he's the cause of cancer.
Right.
As far as the left is concerned, this guy is Satan. He's just cracked the crust of the earth and erupted, and he's here. The only problem is he's already had 4 years as president of the United States, and none of the things they claim he will do in office, he did. It just doesn't exist. It's all fantasy. This is what happens when you run a campaign that never stops, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped since he ran against Hillary Clinton. It started in 2015 when he came down the escalator. Mm-hmm. They have to destroy him. They have to paint the picture of who he is, but they don't know how to handle the fact that he's got a track record that proves everything that they're saying is 100% wrong. He doesn't destroy the economy. He makes it thrive. He doesn't make the world a more dangerous place. It's a safer place with less war, less confrontation, and more agreement. Every demographic across the board that the Democrats have sliced and diced our country into thrived during the Trump administration. So when you employ this destroy at all cost and the truth doesn't matter type of tactic, you eventually get yourself backed up against the wall where you have to keep lying because you can't live up to the expectations of what you said.
Well, exactly right. Exactly right. And when you declare someone to be Hitler and all these things, it's very hard to come back from that, and especially, and I think, Frank, they set that up on purpose because there will be challenges like you've never seen if Trump wins this election in terms of even certifying the vote or getting him sworn in to be president. I don't put anything past these people.
Well, Jamie Raskin, who is like your ultimate elected official as a Trump denier, even more so than Adam Schiff. And by the way, if Adam Schiff goes to jail, it should be on perjury charges.
Right.
And if Nancy Pelosi goes to jail, it should be for SEC insider trading violations. Those are two legitimate charges that should be leveled against those two people. They should pay a penalty for it. If you or I did it, we'd go to prison.
Oh, sure. Well, exactly.
But this Jamie Raskin has said that, we'll find a way to make sure he can't take office under, we're going to have these challenges. We're not going to certify the vote in the Electoral College. We'll challenge it. What happened to you got to go with the election result.
Well, that was that.
Yeah, and if Antifa and the people who took to the streets who were the paid supporters by George Soros during the summer of 2020, the people who set fire to Portland and Seattle and Chicago and LA and New York, if they show up at the Capitol building on January 6th, 2024, and they do what they did in these city streets, is that going to be an insurrection, or is that going to be a protest, an exercise of government redress because we're constitutional and the other person isn't?
Oh yeah, no, they will absolutely say we're protecting democracy because we are the sole protectors of democracy, and that's why they've carpet bombed everything in the media with that phraseology for so long.
This is why I can't take people who are supporting Democrats just because it's a D. I can't take them seriously anymore. They're not serious people.
Yeah.
They're people who have a political crack habit of always pulling the lever that they've always pulled because it's always what they've done. That's never an excuse. It's never an excuse. We've got to start getting off our asses and doing research into the people that you cast a vote for. That includes judges. Do you retain them? Do you not? It may take 15 to 20 minutes doing some searches on these judges' names on the internet, but there's enough resources out there to understand who you're saying let's retain.
That's right.
Because some of these judges are the judges that say, you know what, I'm gonna stop this federal law because I'm a judge and I wear a black robe, and I'm going to stop it because I'm going to say it's unconstitutional. But it gets overturned at the next layer because they didn't know what the hell they were talking about because the people elected an idiot as a judge.
Right, an activist judge. Well, I'll tell you what, Frank, we do have a telephone caller this morning. We've got Timmy, and he's in Nokomis. And he has a question or comment for you this morning. Good morning, Timmy. Welcome back to the program.
Morning, guys. Just quickly, as a felon, I can't vote in Florida, and I'm thinking that Trump, as soon as he physically votes, they could arrest him for it. Let me know what you think. Thank you.
Okay, interesting question. What do you think, Frank?
He's not a convicted felon. You're not convicted. You're not convicted until you're sentenced.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And Alan Dershowitz has pointed that out several times, that because he is on appeal and we're already seeing these appellate courts starting to overturn the amounts of the awards and possibly even the adjudications, that their lie about him being a convicted felon, it's not holding water.
Yeah.
It's not accurate.
Yeah. And we've heard from Timmy, of course, before here on the show, and that's actually an interesting question because you would think, Frank, that if that was in fact the case, that they would just be waiting for this. And they'd even be telling you about it in their speeches or whatever. When he votes, he's going to jail, whatever it might be. They would really try to capitalize on that.
Well, and to Timmy's point, the left has never needed to be legitimate in order to do things. They've moved things forward and said, well, we'll let it play out in the courts. We're going to do it anyway. Look at what Joe Biden did. He forgave student loans for people who are in the public service sector of the federal government. Even though the Supreme Court said, you will not do this. He goes, but I'm going to do it anyway.
But I thought Kamala said, we follow the law. Of course, unless when the Supreme Court goes rogue, I guess.
And that's another question. If anybody who was listening with ears wide open during that interview heard her say "we" a lot of times. Who's we?
Yeah,
it's not a committee that's running for president of the United States. I get that you have a cabinet. They're supposed to be advisory. I get that you have senior advisors. They're supposed to be advisory. So we don't do anything. She would be doing something. So it's either an indication that the buck doesn't stop with her because she's too much of a coward to own what she says and does, or that for the entirety of the time that Obama 2.0 has been in Washington, D.C., they've been pulling her puppet strings.
Well, and I think that she, is kind of comfortable in that whole situation. To wit, she didn't go to the Al Smith dinner. She doesn't engage, and she hasn't even had a press conference, for goodness sakes.
You can't have a press conference without a teleprompter.
That's right.
Exactly. Or the exact same earrings she wore in both the debate and the interview.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I'm telling you. And then the look on her face when Brett Baer said, when did you know? When did it become apparent, essentially, that something was wrong with Joe Biden? And she vaporlocked for a second because, she knew that whatever she says now, it's going to be bad.
Well, that was another moment where I haven't been to Europe. I haven't been to Europe. Trump's not on the Trump's on the ballot.
Yeah.
Let's deflect. Where's my go-to? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? She's not a smart human being. She can't play on the national stage in politics. She was a poor pick. She's a poor choice. Don't vote for her.
You're listening to Underground USA.
When a government restricts the free speech of its people, it disrupts freedom and societal function, casting a shadow over the democratic process and the diversity of ideas. Free speech restrictions lead to countries where only certain viewpoints are heard. They stifle opposition and reduce the democratic process to a disingenuous formality. When people fear repercussions for their speech, they self-censor. This doesn't just limit controversial or offensive speech, but also destroys innovation, creativity, and even necessary discourse. Over time, this leads to a homogenization of thought, where only safe or approved ideas are expressed. And suppressing speech doesn't eliminate the underlying issues or beliefs, but drives them underground. Governments that curtail free speech do so to maintain control. When speech is controlled, it's easier for those in power to manipulate narratives, suppress dissent, and maintain their grip on power. That's why, when Kamala Harris says this, we should all be alarmed.
There has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
Any government's fascist restriction of free speech sets off a domino effect where freedom incrementally disappears. It's a foundational right that supports the structure of all other liberties, and its restriction can lead to a society where control overshadows freedom. And that appears to be quite all right with far-left Democrats, the DNC, and the Harris campaign. They're not saying it, but your right to free speech is on the ballot this November. Vote accordingly.
The federal government is becoming more centralized by the day.
Opportunistic politicians are centralizing power in Washington, D.C., and incrementally whittling away at our rights. Should the worst-case scenario play out and Kamala Harris and Obama 3.0 assume power on November 5th, we must be prepared with a plan to rein in the Marxism they will unleash through the federal government. Nullification, the case for decentralizing the federal government by Frank Salvato, lays out a plan in which the state governments can claw back their sovereignty from the overreach of the federal government, saving us from a second bloody civil war. Arm yourself with the knowledge of this nation-saving option. Get your copy of Nullification, the case for decentralizing the federal government, available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
You're listening to Underground USA.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes directly into your email box, circumventing the censors and the fact-checkers of social media. A very important avenue to have this direct communication as we move forward into the final stretch of the 2024 election cycle. And please remember the people who lost everything during the current storms, especially the people in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and northern Georgia. Just because the mainstream media complex has moved on from the story, it doesn't mean that they still don't need our help, materially, financially, and at the ballot box. And don't forget to discuss politics, religion, and current events with your friends, families, acquaintances. It's important that we talk to each other, because when we do, we understand that we have more in common than we do in difference. And that's how we beat the deep state elected class, who is constantly trying to balkanize us to be able to cobble together that 51% to win elections. United we stand, divided we fall. E pluribus unum. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.